We go back to the 5Ds era to take a look at the archetype that altered the entire course of the show. We're taking a look at the Blackwing archetype used by the main tritagonist of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, Crow. And yeah, when I say that the archetype altered the course of the entire show, well, here's a little behind the scenes input. Crow was originally supposed to be the final boss of the Dark Signers arc, but because the Blackwings were so popular and so meta-relevant, even being very close to a tier 0 deck back in their days, Crow's character was massively changed, and then the concept of 5Ds was betrayed into 6Ds, but well, more on that later. Anyway, this archetype even today still kicks ass, and let's start off with this archetype, shall we? With the first monster, Blackwing Orochi the Squall. This is a level 1 tuner with 400 attack and 600 defense. And if you control a Blackwing monster other than Blackwing Orochi the Squall, you can special summon this card from your hand, and you can only special summon Blackwing Orochi the Squall once per turn this way. If this card is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, you can target one monster on the field and change its battle position. Now, the floating effect ain't too impressive, but what is impressive here that most of the Blackwing monsters have a very simple special summoning conditions, and basically in order to special summon the majority of the Blackwings, you just simply have to control a Blackwing other than the Blackwing you're trying to summon. Not to mention, this thing is a level 1 tuner, which is a very welcome choice in the deck. However, you can only special summon him once per turn, but still, the archetype has enough special summoning going on around in order to warrant that restriction being there. And also, it's really good. What else can I say? Not that good is Blackwing Hurricane the Tornado. It's another level 1 tuner with 0 attack and defense this time, and once per turn you can target one Synchro Monster on the field. This card's attack becomes that monster's current attack until the end of this turn. Oh, I'm a strong bird with a undershirt and jean shorts, and I'm big and strong, and I don't do anything else. Yeah, it's a tuner, so I guess that helps a bit. Yeah, we're supposed to like use this in order to make this thing's attack become the same as the opponent's synchro monster and then crash into it, and it's not the way you play the deck, so you basically don't run this. Next up we have Blackwing Jin the Rain Shadow. If this card battles a face-up monster with defense equal to or less than this card's attack, destroy that monster at the end of the damage step without damage calculation. This effect is so outdated, it couldn't be even more outdated if it thrived. First of all, the defense has to be like 600 or less in order for this effect to even go off. It's a tuner, so I guess it's good. No, it isn't. There are some Blackwings which can boost this thing's attack up by a significant amount, but you're not going to be wasting those effects on this piece of shit, so no. Next up we have their first non-tuner level 1, that being Blackwing Jetstream the Blue Sky. During damage calculation, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to prevent a Blackwing monster you control from being destroyed by battle. Most of the monsters, high-level beatstick monsters you want to run in your Blackwing decks, also already can't be destroyed by battle by a built-in effect. So if you run this, it's probably not more than one, since the main deck monsters tend to not stick on the field for too long. So yeah. Next up we have Blackwing Vayu, the Emblem of Honor. The last level 1, it's also a tuner. And this face-up card on the field cannot be used as a synchro material. If this card is in the graveyard, you can target one non-tuner Blackwing monster in your graveyard, banish both this card and that target, and if you do, special summon one Blackwing synchro monster from your extra deck whose levels equal the total levels of the banished monsters, but its effects are negated. Yeah, to put it simply, it's basically an archetypal miracle fusion, at the cost of negating the Synchro Monsters' effects, and not to mention that this thing on the field for some inexplicable reason can't be used as a Synchro material. I am beyond baffled by that decision. But anyway, you can get a nice synchro out on the field, and you're most likely going to use said synchro monsters to further your play because its effects get negated. So yeah, again, it's a questionable one-off if I ever saw one. Next up, we have Blackwing Harmattan the Dust, their first level 2. If you control a Blackwing monster other than this thing, you can special summon this card from your hand, and you can only special summon him once per turn this way. And when this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one other Blackwing monster you control and increase this card's level by the level of that monster. It's alright. It's another Blackwing that special summons itself, which is by default makes it worth running. And its second effect can help you out in the Xyz department. You can also use it in order to set up synchro plays, and that's about it. It's basically a very splashable monster, which okay, it relies on you controlling face-up monsters in order to use that effect. Then again, you're most likely going to be special summoning it by its own effect, which also requires you to control monsters. So yeah, this is a nice card to consider remaining. Next up, we have Blackwing Gust the Backblast. Another level 2, and if you control no cards, you can special summon this card from your hand. If your opponent's monster attacks a Blackwing monster you control, the attacking monster loses 300 attack during the damage step only. Yeah, another very decent card, and can you guess why? Well, it's because of that outstanding 300 attack point reduction during the battle phase. No, you basically, this is the best way you can actually start making plays, because if you have no cards on the field, then you special summon this, and then special summon a whole lot of bunch of Blackwing monsters, along with having your normal summons still remaining, and yeah. However, you're most likely not going to be, well, you also always tend to go second 90% of the time in Yu-Gi-Oh, so you can basically open up with this well 80% of the time. So yeah, I guess 2 copies are the top you're supposed to run in your main deck. Next up, we have Blackwing Blizzard the Far North. This is a tuner monster, and which cannot be special summoned. And when this card is normal summoned, you can target one level 4 or lower Blackwing monster in your graveyard and special summon it in defense position. Yeah, this is also a very good card, because the fact that it cannot be cannot be special summoned doesn't matter in the long run, since you use this to basically revive Blackwing, then proceed to make plays from there. And yeah, very splashable monster indeed, and it's basically a 3-off staple in the archetype. Not to mention that this thing also has a pretty gargantuan attack stat for a level 2 monster. So yeah. Next up, we have Blackwing Feign the Steel Chain. This card can attack your opponent directly. If this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by a direct attack, target one attack position monster your opponent controls and change it to defense position. Yeah, very outdated effect, and you basically don't run this nowadays because of Link monsters or a tank, so yeah, despite the cool design, don't bother with this one. Next up, we have Blackwing Mistral the Silver Shield. This is a tuner monster, and if this card is on the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, reduce the next battle damage you take this turn to 0. I mean, in slower formats, this used to be a pretty sick way to wipe away battle damage, but nowadays I would have actually preferred it a lot more if it was like a hand trap kind of effect, if that effect really needs to exist for some reason. Also, this thing is a tuner monster, so it's basically not going to stick around and be destroyed by any means. Yeah, this effect triggers if it's destroyed by any means, not just battle or card effects. So yeah. Next up, we have Blackwing Breeze the Zephyr, their first level 3 monster, and it's another tuner. And if this card is added from your deck to your hand by a card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand, and this thing cannot be used as a synchro material except for the synchro summon of a Blackwing monster. Yeah, also a very nice special summoning condition, since the archetype will be doing a lot of searching, and they have more than one support card in order to add this thing from your to your hand. However, I am actually a bit disappointed that if it is not added to your hand by any means, kind of like Lilybell in Trickstars, it has to specifically be added from your deck to your hand, not from the graveyard or being banished. So yeah, that kind of renders it that kind of hinders his usability in the deck, but still the card is more than good enough in order to be ran at 2 or 3. Next up we have Blackwing Steam the Cloak. If this face-up card leaves the field, special summon one Steam token, Aqua type wind, level 1, attack 100, defense 100. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can tribute one monster in order to special summon this card from your graveyard, and you can only use this effect once per duel. If this card is summoned this way and uses as a Synchro Material monster, all other Synchro Material monsters must be Blackwing monsters. Fun fact, this thing is actually banned in the OCG, and I cannot tell you for the life of me. But yeah, the usefulness can definitely be seen here. If you actually find a way to consistently recycle this card, you can basically spawn an infinite amount of Steam tokens, which you can use for link plays and basically any kind of extra deck plays which you might need. And also it has a very handy revival effect, which requires to tribute a monster on the field, which can be any monster, so you can basically abuse some floating effects if you think about some other splashability options. So yeah, definitely do run 1 or 2 of these, although it is a bit unfortunate that his revival effect can only be used once per duel, so yeah. Next up we have Blackwing Adhesion of 2 Swords. If a Blackwing monster you control battles an opponent's monster, and your opponent still controls that monster at the end of the damage step, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to inflict 1000 points of damage to your opponent. The Blackwings do have some variety of hand traps, and this is certainly not the one you want to consider running, so yeah. Next up we have Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind. If you control a Blackwing monster other than Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind, you can special summon this card from your hand, and once per turn you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. That target's attack and defense become half its current attack and defense. This is definitely a hard 3-off staple in the early days of Blackwings and even nowadays, because not only can you special summon this thing by simply controlling a Blackwing monster, but it doesn't actually lock you into special summoning her only once per turn this way, and not to mention that it has a attack and defense halving effect, which is even permanent. And this is all, mind you, on top of a level 3 1300 attack tuner monster. Absolutely max out on this thing. Next up we have Blackwing Damascus the Polar Knight. During either player's turn, you can discard this card to target one Blackwing monster you control. It gains 500 attack until the end phase. Just as a spoiler warning, the Archetype already has a hand trap which boosts a monster's attack, which is leagues better than this thing, so don't bother with this one. Next up we have Ghibli the Searing Wind, Blackwing Ghibli the Searing Wind to be more precise. And when your opponent declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. Once per turn you can switch the original attack and defense of this card. This is basically meant to be like a prototype Battle Fader to save yourself from like a direct attack, but on this the Battle Fader is miles better in every single aspect of this card. Sure, you can make it into a 1600 attack beat stick, but that's about it. It's not even a tuner, so yeah. Next up we have Blackwing Gladius the Midnight Sun. If the only face-up monster you control is one Blackwing monster other than Blackwing Gladius, you can special summon this card from your hand, and once per turn this card cannot be destroyed by battle. Yeah, this is basically something you summon. This is basically what you summon right after you summon Gust the Backblast, and you still have a normal summon remaining, and then you go from there. So, yeah, run any number of these. Next up, we have Blackwing Pinaki the Waxing Moon. This is a tuner monster. unlike Gladius, and cannot be used as a synchro material except for the synchro summon of a Blackwing Synchro Monster. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add one Blackwing monster from your deck to your hand except Blackwing Pinaki the Waxing Moon. You can only use this effect once per turn. It's basically a searcher, so rather slow, but still it fetches your entire monster lineup, and basically it doesn't require any specific way that it needs to be sent to the graveyard. If it hits the graveyard in any conceivable way, you get to perform a search, admittedly during the end phase, but it's still a nice thing to consider. You basically run one of these if you feel like it. Next up we have Blackwing Collude the Moonshadow, their last level 3. And during either player's damage step, when a Blackwing monster you control is attacking or being attacked, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. That monster gains 1400 attack until the end of this turn. This is basically an archetypal honest, and for all what it does, you might feel that the attack point boost is on the average side, but this thing is an archetypal honest, mind you, which is stackable, so you can actually turn some of your lower beatsticks into pretty versatile attackers, and not to mention it turns their boss monsters into unstoppable engines of destructions. You basically run 3 of these and never think about running any less. Oh, next up we jump into the level 4s. First off we have the absolute legend Blackwing Zephyros the Elite. This is a level 4 that if this thing is in your graveyard, you can return one face-up card you control to the hand in order to special summon it, and if you do, take 400 damage. And you can only use this effect once per duel. This is a star of so many decks that I can't list them all up. First of all, the cost you need to pay in order to revive this thing is basically pluses you every single time you use them, because self-bouncing is some of the most valued effects you can perform. You get to recycle your floodgates, you have some other stuff whose effects activates when they leave the field, or when they if you need to refresh their summon effects, maybe. The effect damage can proc some stuff like Heroic Challenger 1000 Blades. If you're going into a rank 4 variant, yeah, this thing even sees plays in Heroic Challengers, like I said, and is the most common thing you use in order to proc the Heroic Challenger 1000 Blades' effect. So, yeah. You only run one of these, however, due to the fact that this awesome revival effect can only be used once per duel. But the Archetype has enough searching and graveyard setup in order to warrant running only one of these. Next up we have Blackwing Bora the Spear. If you control a Blackwing monster other than this thing, you can special summon it, and it can inflict piercing damage. You basically run this because of its summoning condition, and it doesn't block you into summoning more of them, so yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Next up we have Blackwing Tornado the Reverse Wind. When this card is normal summoned while your opponent controls a special summoned monster, you can target one Blackwing Tuner in your graveyard. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except Blackwing monsters. Also special summon that monster, but its effects are negated. It basically recovers your tuner monsters, basically enabling you to go into an instant synchro or a link, even though it locks you into Blackwings, the archetype that does not have anything other than synchro monsters. So, yeah, instant synchro it is then. So, yeah, it's also worth running at least one of these. Next up we have Blackwing Kochi the Daybreak. If this card was special summoned, it cannot be used as synchro material. Huh. What exactly is this supposed to contribute to? It basically forces you to normal summon this thing in order for it to be used what the archetype is based around. No, just don't bother with this one. Next up we have Blackwing Chris the Crack of Dawn. If you control a Blackwing monster other than this thing, you can special summon this card from your hand, and you can only special summon him once per turn this way, and once per turn it cannot be destroyed by spell or trap effects. Again, it mostly ran because of its special summoning condition, and yeah, it locks you into summoning only one of them, and it does occasionally come in handy, the protection effect, which is admirable, but yeah, you mostly run it because of the swarming. Also, it's a 1900 attack beatstick, so go figure. Next up we have Blackwing Shura, the Blue Flame. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can special summon one Blackwing monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck, but its effects are negated. In slower form, as this used to be the star of the show, since this thing can beat the opponent's monsters into submission, along with special summoning more additional beaters, among which can be tuners, which allows you to go into some higher Synchro Monsters. But nowadays, it's a bit too outdated in order to consider it. Yeah, it is a decent beatstick, but if you really feel like it, run one. Next up we have Blackwing Oster, the South Wind. This one cannot be special summoned as well. And when this card is normal summoned, you can target one of your banished level 4 or lower Blackwing monsters, special summon it in defense position, and you can banish this card from your graveyard to activate one of the following effects. Place one black feather counters on one Blackwing dragon you control equal to the number of cards your opponent controls, or place one wedge counter on each face-up card your monster your opponent controls that does not have one. Okay, so this is one of the newer support cards. First of all, when it's normal summon, you retrieve a banished Blackwing. So far, the Archetype hasn't shown any semblance of relying on banishing stuff in order to make its plays, but they will soon have some support cards which actually do banish Blackwing monsters in order to function properly. Or also you can use Allure of Darkness, which is a welcome choice in the deck, but more on that later. However, the second effect, to the one who's completely unfamiliar with the Archetype, might be a bit baffling. Counters, and two different kinds of counters, and one of which has to be on a very specific monster. We'll get to the Blackwing, the dragon, and the Black Feather counters soon enough. However, the relevant thing here are the wedge counter on the monsters that don't have them. Also, we'll get more onto it later, but because of this is basically ran at 2 or 3 copies because of that fact. Next up we have Blackwing Decay, the Ill Wind. Once per turn during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, take 1000 damage. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can target one Blackwing monster you control, then activate one of its effects. Increase its level by 1 or reduce its level by 1, and you can only use this effect once per turn. Yeah, this is a level shifter effect and unnecessary burn enabler unless you're like running 1000 blades or something. And level switching can be alright-ish, but this is a way too slow of an effect in order to pull it off consistently, and when it will actually matter in the long run. And we just seen a monster in the Archetype who can change levels and actually do it a bit more faster than this thing, so it's not worth running in the long run. Next up we have Blackwing Calima, the Haze. During your opponent's battle phase, if you control no monsters, you can banish this card from your graveyard to target one Synchro monster in your graveyard. Special summon that target, but banish it at the end of the battle phase. This is a quick effect. This is a bit of a weird effect because it straight up lets you summon any Synchro monster from your graveyard, and it's a bit of a bummer that you don't that you must control no other monsters in order to activate this effect, which makes it a bit cloggy to consider running. So no. Next up we have before we move on to the higher level monsters, we have Hunter of Black Feathers, which I do not know even existed. And when your opponent controls 2 or more face-up monsters, all of the same type, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, select and destroy one face-up monster your opponent controls. This is supposed to be like Blackwing anti-support, and yeah, it's like I did not know this thing was even a thing. The destruction effect is surprisingly not once per turn, and yeah, your opponent is probably going to get rid of this before it even gets to move, so no, it's not worth it. Next up we also have a legend, that being Blackwing Gofu, the Vague Shadow. Cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand while you control no monsters. When this card is special summoned from your hand, you can special summon 2 vague shadow tokens, which are Winged Beast, Dark level 1, attack 0, defense 0, but they cannot be tributed or be used as a synchro material. You can banish this card and one or more face-up non-tuners you control, then target one Blackwing Synchro Monster in your graveyard whose level equals the total levels of the banished monsters ahead on the field. Special summon it, and if you do, it is treated as a tuner monster. Yeah, this little guy is straight up banned. You can't play him because, well, it's basically a special summonable a monster which gives you 2 tokens and without using your normal summon, of course. Basically, it's an instant link 3 or higher monster, and it's banned for a reason. It's a bit of a funny thing that this thing is a tuner, by the way. Like, you can't use the tokens in order to perform a synchro summon like what the archetype is based around, but it has more link utility than it does the synchro utility in order to consider running it if it ever gets out of the banned jail. Next up we have Blackwing Brizote the Tailwind. If 2 or more face-up Blackwing monsters you control were destroyed this turn, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material, gain 600 life points. Yeah, you'd think that this thing's special summoning condition is like a quick effect, but when you take a trip to the rulings, you see that this thing can only be special summoned during the main phase. So the most relevant thing that can where you can summon this thing if you got flattened by something like Mirror Force or something, so it's not worth it. Also, the 600 lovely life points when you synchro summon is the cherry on top. Next up, we have Blackwing Healing the Tengu Wind. This is also a level 5 with 2300 defense and 0 attack. And when you take 2000 or more battle damage from your opponent's monster's direct attack while this card is in the graveyard, you can target one level 3 or lower Blackwing monster in your graveyard, special summon that monster, and this a card from the graveyard. Their effects are negated, and each player can only use this effect of Blackwing Heal in the Tengu Wind once per turn. It's basically a reverse logic of what this effect is supposed to be exactly. If this effect made any sense, it would special summon itself along with another monster before before a damage of 2000 or more is about to inflict, like a Nutrient Z type of card. But no, it's not only is it not that, but it's also a very interesting fact that this thing specifically states that each player can only use this effect once per duel. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd ruling there and odd wording in that regard. And yeah, that's basically everything that it amounts to. However, this effect does exist in order to showcase that amazing comeback Crow did in order to special summon Blackwing the Dragon while having 0 life points, so Yusei can go onto the field with a slight field of protection against the Iliaster Emperors. So I guess that works, but not in real life. Next up we have Blackwing Boreas the Sharp. During your main phase 1, you can banish this card from the graveyard and target one Blackwing monster you control. If that monster attacks this turn, you take no battle damage from that attack, and if it is not destroyed by that battle. Also destroy the opponent's monster that it battled after damage calculation. I guess you can banish this as a nasty surprise against like an opponent that if you're like crashing into a huge monster which you can get rid of, then you banish this in order to get rid of it. But Blackwings usually tend to have just about enough power output in order to get rid of a potential threat if they're consistent enough in producing said power output. So if you run this, it's probably not more than 1. Next up we have Blackwing Sirocco the Dawn. If your opponent controls a monster and you control no monsters, you can normal summon or set this card without tributing. Once per turn during your main phase 1, you can target one Blackwing monster you control until the end of this turn. It gains attack equal to the total attack of all Blackwing monsters currently on the field, except itself. Monsters other than the targeted monster cannot attack during the turn you activate this effect. There are so many better effects that do the exact same thing or for a much better payoff, and yeah, if you really crave an effect such as this, you either play Desgbot 009 or Crusadia Equimax. Next up we have Assault Blackwing, Kunai the Drizzle. This is their final level 5. And with 2100 attack this one, and you can special summon this card from your hand by tributing one Blackwing monster. If summoned this way, this card is treated as a tuner monster. Once per turn you can target one Synchro Monster you control and declare one level from level 1 to 8, and it becomes that level until the end of this turn. I guess it's fine. You can like tribute Zephyros the Elite in order to then proc his graveyard effect and then get this card to become a tuner monster, then go into a synchro. But none of the monsters, none of the synchro lineup actually require a synchro monster specifically in order to get their effects off. But I guess the options here, if you want to take it for some reason. Anyway, yeah, it has the summoning condition could be a bit better. It's not very reminiscent of Blackwing, so I guess you can run one if you really feel like it. Next up we have Blackwing Kogarashi the Wanderer, a level 6 with 2300 attack. And when a face-up Blackwing monster you control is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard except during the damage step, you can special summon this card from your hand, and when a monster is synchro summoned using this card as a synchro material, the opponent of this card's owner cannot activate cards or effects. I would have loved it a bit more if it was a lower level, because when you use this thing as a synchro material, basically cards or effects cannot be activated until the monster is successfully summoned, which would actually benefit a whole lot to some monsters, since floodgates can get a bit screwed over by floodgates. So yeah, it's basically, if it was a level 4, then I would appreciate it a lot more. Yeah, keep everything else as it is and make it a level 4, and I would have loved it a lot more. Next up we have the final level 6, oh no, the semi-final level 6, that being Blackwing Elphin the Raven. If you control a Blackwing monster, you can normal summon this card without tributing. When this card is normal summoned, you can target one monster your opponent controls and change its battle position. Yeah, just don't run this, it's the Link era, what are we thinking about nowadays? Next up we have Blackwing Simoon the Poison Wind. If you control no monsters and have this card in your hand, you can banish one Blackwing monster from your hand, place one Black Whirlwind from your deck to face up in your spell and trap zone. Then either send this card to the graveyard or immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon it without tributing. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except the dark monsters. You can only use this effect of Blackwing Simon the Poison Wind once per turn. During the end phase, send the Black Whirlwind placed by this effect to the graveyard, and if you do, take 1000 damage. Yeah, very bloated effect indeed, because this happens to be one of their newer support cards, and Black Whirlwind is one of their spell and trap cards, so yeah, one of their spell cards to be more precise, which also happens to be comboing well with this thing, so I guess it actually pays off in the end. You can also, for example, to avoid that nasty 1000 burn, you can bounce back your Black Whirlwinds with Zephyros the Elite. Can you see how good that card is right now? And yeah, basically work from there. Yeah, I usually see Blackwing players running 3 of these, so yeah. Next up we have their first level 7 monster, Blackwing Abrolhos the Mega-Quake. This one cannot be special summoned, and this card cannot destroy monsters by battle. Okay. If this card battles a monster after damage calculation, return it to the hand. Return that monster to the hand, to be more precise. And once per turn during your main phase 1, you can have this card lose exactly 1000 attack, and if you do, return all cards in your opponent's spell and trap zone to the hand. Not only is this a Blackwing, which cannot be special summoned and having no other effects to circumvent that bad effect, but also you can't destroy monsters by battle with this thing. Yeah, you return them to the hand instead, but for the effort you need to summon it in order to attack with this even once, it's really not worth it. And also the giant Runate effect also does you more harm than good, so no, not worth it. Next up we have their final main deck monster, that being Blackwing Aurora the Northern Lights. This is a level 10 with undetermined attack points and cannot be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand by banishing 2 face-up monsters you control, a Blackwing Tuner and a non-tuner, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Once per turn you can banish 1 Blackwing Synchro Monster from your extra deck. Until the end phase, this card's name and original attack becomes that monster's, and replace this effect with that monster's original effects. I guess you can place this in as a tech choice, maybe, in a format where like summoning from the extra deck can be severely hindered. So I guess it can work, but anyway, it's a very specific special summoning condition whose effect can be a bit way too costly at times, so it's generally not worth it. Now moving on finally to the Synchro Monsters. First up we have Assault Blackwing Sayo the Rain Hider. This is a level 2, which is completely generic, and if this card is Synchro summoned using a Blackwing monster as material, it is treated as a tuner while face up on the field, and twice per turn it cannot be destroyed by battle. It's a pretty decent effect for a level 2 tuner monster, but if you really want a level 2 tuner monster, which is also a Synchro monster, you tend to run Formula Synchron, so yeah, sorry buddy. Next up we have Assault Blackwing Sohaya the Rainstorm. This is a level 5 with 1500 attack and 2000 defense, and is completely generic as well. And if this card is Synchro summoned using a Blackwing monster as material, it is treated as a tuner monster. This happens to be the main gimmick of these Assault Blackwings. And while face up on the field, you can only use each effect of Assault Blackwing Sohaya the Rainstorm once per turn. When this card is Synchro summoned, you can target 1 Assault Blackwing monster in your graveyard and special summon it. And during your main phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can banish 1 another Assault Blackwing other than Assault Blackwing Sohaya the Rainstorm from your graveyard and special summon this card. It's alright, I guess. Those 2 effects can be a bit too specific, since it specifically requires Assault Blackwings, and those are, first of all, much less populated than the original Blackwings, and not to mention that most of them are not even ran, so I guess it works so far. I mean, it is a decent one-off, if anything. Next up we have Blackwing Gram the Shining Star, another generic level 5, and must be Synchro summoned. When this card is Synchro summoned, you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower non-tuner Blackwing monster from your hand, but its effects are negated. If you somehow didn't manage to special summon all of your Blackwing monsters on turn 1, this can be a decent helping hand, but anything other than that is generally not recommended at more than 1. Next up we have a monster which actually lore-wise falls under the Blackwing archetype, that being Vortex the Whirlwind. Requires a tuner or 1 or more non-tuner winged beast type monsters, and when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, and you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower winged beast type monster from your deck. I guess you can actually use this effect. Well, I mean, it's a level 5 with okayish attack points, and if it happens to be destroyed, you can basically special summon any level 4 or lower winged beast, which is tolerable, but not enough to warrant running any more than 1 of these. Next up we have Blackwing Armed Wing. It's our first level 6 monster, and requires a Blackwing tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and if it attacks a defense position monster, it gains 500 attack, and it can inflict piercing damage. Again, used to be a very powerful tech choice and beatstick in the glory days of Blackwings, but now in the linked focused era where there's barely any defense points going on, it's basically irrelevant. Next up we have Blackwing Nothung the Star Knight or Starlight. I can't read this properly. Requires one tuner, one or more non-tuner monsters, and if this card is special summoned, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. Then one face-up monster your opponent controls loses 800 attack and defense. You can only use this effect of Blackwing Nothung the Starlight, alright, once per turn. During your main phase, you can normal summon one Blackwing monster in addition to a normal summoner set, and you gain this effect once per turn. You can generally run 2 to 3 of these due to the fact that this thing gives you an additional normal summon, which in Blackwings is a huge deal, since the archetype can provide some massive field presence. So yeah, it's a tolerable beatstick for a level 6, so yeah, that works as well. Next up we go into the level 7 monsters, first of which is Blackwing Armor Master. This one requires a Blackwing tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters and cannot be destroyed by battle. And you take no battle damage from attacks involving this card. At the end of the damage step, if this card attacked a monster, you can place one wedge counter on that monster, max 1, and you can remove all wedge counters from your opponent's monsters. The attack and defense of those monsters that had wedge counters become 0 until the end of this turn. So this card generally used to kick ass in the glory days of Blackwings, and it still kicks ass today. A very easily summonable level 7, which cannot be destroyed by battle, and basically reduces all battle damage to 0, and basically being able to make any monster that battles this card lose all its attack, well, temporarily that is, was such a huge deal now back then. That basically is one of the reasons why Blackwing were so meta relevant and popular. Absolutely max out on this one. Next up we have Assault Blackwing Raikiri the Rain Shower. Basically Crow's ace monster during Arc 5. It requires a tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters, and if this card is synchro summoned using a Blackwing monster as material, it is treated as a tuner monster while face up on the field, and once per turn you can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of Blackwing monsters you control, destroy them. Just like Armor Master, this is very much well worth running, because Blackwing can certainly have an impressive board of monsters, so you can basically destroy 4 to 5 cards instantly upon this thing hitting the field. Also, it has the Assault Blackwing effect of being treated as a tuner monster if it used the Blackwing monster as material. So yeah, definitely worth running. Next up we have Assault Blackwing Chidori the Rain Sparkling. Another level 7 with same stats and summoning conditions. And this card is synchro summoned using a Blackwing monster as material. It is treated as a tuner monster, and it gains 300 attack for each Blackwing monster in your graveyard, and when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can target one winged beast type synchro monster in your graveyard except him, special summon it. You can basically use this thing's floating effect in order to float into a beatstick that died earlier during the duel. It's not going to happen all that much, but the option is here if you want to take it. Also, the graveyard is going to be swarming with Blackwing, so this thing can also become a pretty huge beatstick. And if we add Cloak into the mix, the things get a whole lot heated. It's worth running at 1 or 2 off. Next up, we have Blackwing Tamer Obsidian Hog Joe. This is their final level 7 and requires a Blackwing tuner, one or more non-tuner Blackwing monsters. And you can target one level 5 or higher winged beast type monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and during either player's turn when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets only this card, or when your opponent targets this card for an attack, you can target one other Blackwing monster you control that would be an appropriate target. That card effect attack now targets that new target. You can only use each effect of Blackwing Tamer once per turn. I'm very pleased about the fact that this thing can actually revive any winged beast type monster, so splash ability it gets a bonus points in that. It's basically also it's a hard once per turn. It has tolerable protection for a level 7. So yeah, I guess you can make a very I guess you can make some and get some mileage from running this guy as well. Next up we have their first level 8 Blackwing Silverwind the Ascendant. This one requires a Blackwing tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters. And you can, when this card is synchro summoned, you can target up to 2 face-up monsters on the field with defense lower than this card's attack, destroy those targets. You cannot conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this effect. You can, during each of your opponent's turns, the first Blackwing monster you control that would be destroyed by battle is not destroyed. Protection is pretty fine, and the summon effect, which used to be pretty kick-ass back in the day, is now completely irrelevant since it specifically targets defense points as its focus, and you know what they say, in Link era, defense points might as not well exist, so yeah. Again, you can get some okay-ish destruction potentially with this thing every 3 to 4 duels, but most of the time you're most likely going to have the protection effect, and which works only by battle, which basically shows that this card got heavily nerfed. And oh boy, now we get to the fun part. Here we have Black-Winged Dragon. This is a level 8 dragon type synchro monster with the following effect. It can be special summoned with any tuner or any non-tuner. And if you would take damage from a card effect, you can place 1 black feather counter on this card instead. And then this card loses 700 attack for each black feather counter on it. Once per turn, you can remove all black feather counters on this card, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. That target loses 700 attack for each black feather counter you removed, and if it does, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack lost by this effect. Okay. It can counter various burn decks like Trickstars, Wave Motion Cannon, anything else like... Yeah, you can really feel, hear, and smell that this thing wasn't even supposed to be real. This is the fabled 6th Signer Dragon, which was shoved into 5Ds due to the fact because Blackwings were so popular during the airtime of 5Ds, and they just had to make him a Signer. Yeah, I would have loved it a lot more if this dragon actually had some great synergy and power on display in Blackwing decks. So yeah, if you really feel like it, there's along with Oster the South Wind, which can actually empower this thing quite a bit, and they have a certain trap card which we'll mention later, which can actually make you benefit from running this, but overall I wouldn't recommend it. Next up we have the manga version of this thing, that being Black Feather Dark Rage Dragon. This is the same. It has the same stats as the original. It requires a tuner and 1 or more non-tuner monsters, and once per turn when you take damage, you can send up to 5 cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard, and if any monster was sent to the graveyard by this effect, this card gains 400 attack. Yeah, this if this effect made any sense, it would be like you gain 400 attack for each monster sent to the graveyard by this effect. But however, the attack boost is permanent, so I guess it helps, maybe. You can proc this thing's effect with like Zephyros or something, or Trick Clown, even if you choose to run it. But overall, it's a worse monster than even the original. So yeah, a tragic name waster in my opinion. Next up we have, now we're getting to the good stuff. We have one of their best boss monsters, Blackwing Full Armor Master. This is their first level 10 monster. Requires a Blackwing tuner, 1 or more non-tuner monsters. Unaffected by other card effects. Each time a monster your opponent controls activates its effect, place 1 wedge counter on that opponent's monster, max 1. After that effect resolves, once per turn you can target 1 monster your opponent controls with a wedge counter, take control of it, and once per turn during the end phase you can destroy all monsters on the field that have a wedge counter. Yes, this is a very bombastic boss monster for an archetype that is, well, a little over a decade old. Basically, incentivizes you to run as many Osters the South Wind as possible in order to spread some wedge counters, and basically allows this thing in order to steal those monsters and to turn them into free link materials, not to mention that the opponent doesn't get the monsters back if you fail to use them. So yeah, not to mention that it's unaffected by absolutely everything, and it's super easy to summon. And along with Kalut, well, it's unaffected by it's unaffected by anything. So yeah, it's a shame that you can't use Kalut, but what we have here is more than enough. Absolutely worth running. Next up, we have the final monster of the archetype, that being Assault Blackwing Onimaru, the Divine Thunder. This is a level 12 monster with actually with 1000 less defense points than full armor master. Requires one tuner, one or more non-tuner monsters, and if this card is synchro summoned using a Blackwing monster's material, it is treated as a tuner while face up on the field. Cannot be destroyed by card effects, and you can target one Blackwing monster in your graveyard. This card's level becomes the same as that monster's, and you can only use this effect once per duel. And if that if this card was synchro summoned using only synchro monsters, attacks this card gains 3000 attack during the damage step only. Yeah, I would still object that the full armor master is a bit of a better boss monster. Yeah, you can. This is basically why why the Assault Blackwings have the tuner thing effect as a staple in order to build up this thing, but still I think Full Armor Master is a way better boss monster than this. Yeah, sure, it doesn't hurt to run one of these, but Full Armor Master is the way to go, man. Next up we have the... Alright, now we're going on to the Spell and Trap support. First up we have Against the Wind. Select one Blackwing monster in your graveyard and take damage equal to the attack of the selected monster added to your hand. This is basically graveyard recycling, which can also trigger Zephyros' effect, so... no, sorry, the Thousand Blades effect. But, yeah, you know what I'm getting at, so... Yeah, basically free graveyard recycling, and most of the monsters have special summoning conditions, so... Yeah, it's very well worth running. Next up we have Raptor Wing Strike. Shuffle one Blackwing monster you control into the main deck to add one Blackwing monster from your deck to the hand. You're most probably going to shuffle something that already used up its summon effect, or something that has been hit by a floodgate of some sort. You can even return you can even return, I think, Synchro Monsters back into the extra deck. No, you can't actually, sorry. It specifically states main deck, so you so you can't like retrieve monsters which were hit by a floodgate in order to perform a search. But still, running one or two of these is usually fine. Next up, we have cards for Black Feathers. Banish one Blackwing monster from your hand, draw two cards, and you cannot special summon during the turn you activate this effect. And you can only use this effect once per turn. Yeah, you get two cards, and you can basically, it's an archetype Allure of Darkness, but it freaking restricts you into special summoning, which the archetype is entirely based on. Yeah, just run Allure of Darkness instead. Next up we have Blackwinged Strafe. Send one Blackwing monster from your hand to the graveyard. To select one defense position monster your opponent controls, send that monster to the graveyard. Yeah, it's non-targeting. No, it is. Yeah, it is actually non-targeting, non-destruction removal of defense position monster. But the keyword here is defense position, so don't run it. Next up, we have Black Whirlwind, which was mentioned by Simoon. When a Blackwing monster is normal summoned to your field, you can add one Blackwing monster from your deck to your hand with less attack than that monster. Yeah, this can basically provide infinite consistency to this archetype, and it's basically why you run 3 of these at all times. You just have to calculate very well which monsters you tend to summon, and then you calculate which monsters to search in order to keep that flow going, and you can end up with a massive board with lots of extra deck monsters. Max out on this one, like I already said. And their final spell card is Glowing Crossbow, an equip spell. Equip only to a Blackwing monster. It gains 500 attack and defense, and you can only use the following effects of Glowing Crossbow once per turn. If the equipped monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can discard one random card from your opponent's hand, and if this card is sent to the graveyard because the equipped monster was used as synchro material, you can add this card from your graveyard to your hand. I mean, if you're really into discarding random cards from your opponent's hand and basically milling, just play Dark Scorpions, because Blackwing's never ever had a focus on doing that, so yeah. Next up we have Blackwing Revenge, the first trap card. When a winged beast type monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, special summon 2 Blackwing Black Crest tokens, which are beast type dark level 2, 0 attack and 800 defense. You can. I would have loved it a bit more if you could actually trigger this effect by your own card effects. Then I would have actually called it a somewhat decent card, since you can actually build some field presence by employing that effect. But it is what it is, and it's a bit too slow for my taste. Next up we have Blackback. During your turn, target one Blackwing monster with 2000 or less attack in your graveyard and special summon that target. And you cannot normal summon or set the turn you activate this card. It's a fun little archetypal monster reborn you can do. It locks you away from normal summoning, which is kind of a bummer, but that isn't that high of a bummer due to the fact that it's, well, the majority of the monsters already have tons of some special summoning conditions, so running 1 or 2 of these is usually okay as well. Next up we have Black Boost. Banish 2 face-up Blackwing tuner monsters you control, draw 2 cards. Everything I said about the cards for Black Feathers applies here. You need to specifically banish two Blackwing tuner monsters this time in order to draw 2 cards. And not to mention that this thing is also a trap card. I'm gonna repeat here. Run freaking Allure of Darkness instead. Next up we have Blackwing Booby Trap. When this set card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while you control a face-up Blackwing monster, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent and draw 1 card. Just don't run this. Like I said, run freaking Allure of Darkness. Next up we have Black Feather Beacon. Activate only when you take damage from a card effect. Special summon 1 level 4 or lower Blackwing monster from your hand. Again, Blackwings tend to special summon themselves all the time from the hand, so the existence of this is entirely pointless. But I guess you can combo it well with Zephyros if you happen to have a monster which does not have a special summoning condition. Next up we have Black Return. When exactly 1 Blackwing monster and no other monster is special summoned, target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, gain life points equal to the attack of that target, and if you do, return it to the hand. I guess you can use this as a decent bouncing option, but yeah, it specifically requires specifically one Blackwing in order to be special summoned, which is easy to do, mind you. But you most probably want to activate an effect like this as soon as an opponent's monster is summoned from the extra deck or from anywhere. Basically, you want a floodgate type of effect, and this basically requires you to make your plays while the opponent's monster is probably sitting already nice and tight on the field already with plenty of protection. So this makes this card's obsolete basically. Next up we have Black Thunder. Activate only when a Blackwing monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. Inflict 400 damage to your opponent for each card that your opponent controls. Maybe if you really dedicate your entire deck around this thing, you can actually build a somewhat fun locals level burn Black Thunder deck. But still, this thing relies on your opponent in order to do stuff. And the best way to swarm the opponent's field with cards is to basically give them free tokens, which goes against the nature of most meta decks in the game. So yeah, it's not worth it. Next up we have Black Sonic. When an opponent's monster declares an attack on a Blackwing monster you control, banish all attack position monsters your opponent controls. And if you control exactly 3 Blackwing monsters and no other monsters, you can also activate this thing from your hand. The alternate activation condition is barely ever going to be pulled off, since you're rarely going to be controlling exactly 3 Blackwings and nothing else, but the option is still there if you need to take it. But holy shit, is this a really good battle trap. It's a non-targeting, non-destruction removal of all the opponent's attack position stuff, which is, like all of the Link monsters, basically this is instant death to all Link monsters. And yeah, it's a fantastic card, and this should definitely be ran in a few copies. Next up we have Blackwing Backlash. And when an opponent's the monster declares a direct attack, well, you have 5 or more Blackwing monsters in your graveyard, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. I believe Black Sonic is a much better option, although this doesn't hurt to run one of these, or 2 if you really feel like it. Next up we have Blackwing Bombardment. Tribute 1 Blackwing monster to select 1 face-up Synchro Monster you control. That Synchro Monster gains attack equal to the tributed monster's attack until the end phase. If you're struggling in order to provide that final big hit and big OTK slap in the face with your Blackwings, this can be certainly be a help, since it can since it's most likely the final push the Archetype needs in order to win duels, so running a copy or 2 couldn't hurt. Next up we have Delta Crow Anti-Reverse. If you control a Blackwing monster, destroy all face down spell or traps your opponent controls, and if you control exactly 3 Blackwing monsters, you can activate this card from your hand. They used to be pretty good when battle traps were more rampant than they are nowadays, because the opponent's back row tends to be face up and activated if it is even present in the first place, so yeah, this basically makes the card obsolete. There's next up we have Fake Feather. Send 1 Blackwing monster from your hand to the graveyard and select 1 normal trap card in your opponent's graveyard. The effect of this card will be the same as the selected normal trap card. Yeah, you can actually use this thing to copy certain nasty floodgates, such as Bottomless Trap Hole, or basically any form of disruption that that might catch the opponent off guard. Maybe even Trap Stun, or well, basically whatever comes in handy in that moment. So yeah, run any number of these if you feel like it. And their final card is Blackbird Close, a counter trap. When a monster your opponent controls activates its effect, you can send 1 face-up Blackwing monster you control to the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. Then you can special summon 1 Blackwing the Dragon from your extra deck, and if you control a Blackwing Synchro Monster or Blackwing Dragon, you can activate this card from your hand. It's simple effect negation, which is very lovely. Negating monster effects is all the rage nowadays, and you also get to summon Blackwing Dragon from your extra deck if you really crave that decrepit old lizard, or basically want to use them as material, so the option's there if you really want to take it. And finally, we have made it to the grading scale. We shall rate some birds now. In terms of consistency, the Archetype opens up well 100% of the time. Well, not 100%, but 99.9999%. It's a very fat 3 out of 3. Power is also a very promising 3 out of 3, since this is actually an archetype that used to struggle with a decent power output back in the day. But with the existence of Blackwing Full Armor Master, or even Maru if you choose to run him, and Blackwing Bombardment can also provide a very satisfying attack point boost. It isn't very consistent. Also, Kalut is a thing, but it can provide a decent power output, so I'll be giving them a 3 out of 3. Comeback ability is also super easy to achieve, so I'll be also giving them a 3 out of 3 due to the fact that they simply need to draw into more special summonable monsters, and that's it. Protection, however, is very sparse and few and far between, and the best form of protection is with Full Armor Master, which you tend to have on the field 90% of the time, and I guess you can make a decent nightmare board with all the special summon monsters in order to make some decent protection. So I'm actually going to be generous here and give him a 2 out of 3. And in terms of versatility, it's a pure 3 out of 3 due to the fact that this is a meta-relevant tier 1 deck which still sees plays and tops events here and there. And I definitely want to see them improve and get some new support, and it basically makes them a very powerful engine of destruction. Not to mention that Zephyros is extremely splashable in loads and loads of other decks. So yeah, this is certainly an archetype done right. And we are done with Blackwings, and tomorrow I'll be uploading the very final 5Ds archetype, which will appear in archetype analysis, because there are simply no other 5Ds archetypes, I believe, unless they like adapt stuff, some other anime exclusive archetypes from 5Ds. Then I might meet you back again, but we'll be taking a look at my favorite archetype, which is the Stardust archetype, the Stardust slash junk slash Synchron Warrior archetype. Yeah, the Stardust part is the part which makes that archetype one of my favorites. So yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos and updates. Comment, like, and subscribe. And as usual, I'll upload the next vid whenever I can. See you all. Have a good day and peace.